Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started in about a minute once everyone gets a chance to get settled in the Zoom room. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. You can put your name, an organizational affiliation, where you're located, and importantly, maybe a word or phrase that describes the value you believe the nonprofit sector brings to our communities.
I'm Mario Damiata, a member of the class of 70. This whole idea for the webinar, really, the germ of the idea came from a proposal that the class of 70 made to Georgetown to host a hilltop dialogue on the health and status of nonprofits, particularly since the November election. And we thought that would be open to all 10 classes that usually attend reunions, and it would kind of stimulate a lot of interest among donors in the classes, as well as graduates who are board members or volunteers in nonprofits. We thought that would be kind of like a nice parting legacy for our 55th reunion. The Hilltop Dialogue proposal did not make the cut, and as intrepid as ever, we pivoted to the Center for Nonprofit for Nonprofit Leadership, Public Sector Nonprofit Leadership. We met Luisa, and from there, the proposal just organically grew to include other clubs, include the Hoya Social Impact Alliance, and took on a life of its own because of the fact that the issues are very timely, relevant, and compelling. So, and we like the idea. I think this is one of the first webinars at Georgetown, and that includes really multiple partners, regional clubs working together with an alliance, plus working together with the faculty at Georgetown to do this. It's a great model. I hope it can continue on other topics. My takeaway today would be that this is not only talking about ideas and strategies about how to keep the lights on for the short term, but also to think about an opportunity here to take a step back and to look at your organizational capabilities, kind of do a health scan of your own, to determine how resilient really your organization can be over the long term, because this is going to be a fairly long-term phenomenon. It's not going to change overnight, and it's really an opportunity to help organizations become smarter, more efficient, more transparent, more accountable down the road. So please treat that as an opportunity to discuss that topic here today. Finally, I would just encourage you to keep this highly interactive discussion. There's an opportunity to take your ideas, thoughts, observations, recommendations, and suggestions and populate them in the chat at any time during the course of this event. And we look forward to this. This is really unique, very special, and I'm going to turn it over to Luisa.
Thank you so much, Mario. And it's been a pleasure partnering with everyone to put this event together. As Mario mentioned, I'm the director of the Center for Public and Nonprofit Leadership, which is housed in the McCourt School of Public Policy. And the center cultivates diverse, transformative, and justice-oriented leaders dedicated to advancing social impact across all sectors. Our leadership development programs for nonprofit and philanthropy leaders are recognized both nationally and internationally. So for today's conversation, we will start off with remarks from nonprofit experts and practitioners to provide context for understanding what nonprofits are facing in the current environment. We will then open it up to you to share your thoughts and questions. While we understand that the current political environment is stressful for many nonprofit leaders, we ask that comments today be focused on how nonprofit organizations can respond to the current environment. We will not be assessing the validity of the policies themselves, so please make sure to keep your comments respectful both verbally and in the chat. I also want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to introduce yourself in the chat. You can put your name, organization, location, and a word or phrase that describes the value you believe the nonprofit sector brings to our communities. So I'm pleased to introduce Valerie Lassiter, who will help us understand the current context. Valerie develops and delivers expert analysis and dynamic leadership to executives and boards through her consulting firm that she founded in 2003, Laster and Associates. She leads the firm to provide mission-driven organizations with strategic planning, fundraising, expertise, customized coaching, and innovative leadership development solutions. With a career spanning government, public affairs, community organizations, and corporate philanthropy, Valerie brings deep industry knowledge and strategic insight to the conversation. And for over 2 decades, she has served as the lead adjunct faculty member at our Center for Public and Nonprofit Leadership's 2 executive programs, our Nonprofit Management Executive Certificate and our Executive Certificate in Philanthropic Leadership. So Valerie, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luisa. It's great to be with everyone today on such a important and hot topic, and certainly important in this climate, but I think always important, right? What we're doing today, Mario, we should be doing in general, right? So after the November election results, many of you, like myself, found yourself asking, what does all of this mean? Now, as the landscape has shifted, beginning to shift, we are starting to see the answer take shape. Across all sectors, we are in a time of unprecedented challenge and opportunity, shaped by dramatic shifts in political priorities, public attitudes, and federal regulations. With this in mind, I want to provide a broad context for where we stand and highlight 3 major areas that is defining our road ahead. There are many, Jim and everyone on the call, there are many things that we could talk about today that I could highlight, but I want to focus on these 3, and that is regulatory changes, U.S. charitable giving, and the rise of philanthropic collaboratives. One of the biggest changes we're seeing is the shift in policy direction from previous administrations. We can all agree on that, no matter what our persuasion is. This is happening largely through a series of executive orders. Someone may say a floodgate or flood zone of executive orders, which aim to reshape public spaces, government, higher education, the nonprofit sector, small business, minority business, women-owned businesses, large enterprises, public education, communities, and beyond. An example of these executive orders, which you all, I'm sure, are familiar with, is titled Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity. This order is positioned to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives across public and private sectors, including nonprofits, corporate foundations, and universities with significant endowments. This is just one of many such orders. So what does this mean in practice, right? Analysts at the Brookings Institution point out that while these executive orders primarily impact the federal workforce, their reach could extend further, deepening depending on legal challenges and how agencies enforce them through federal contracts and funding conditions. Ultimately, they say the courts will play a decisive role in determining how far these policies go. However, we are already seeing a chilling effect on the higher education and business, nonprofits, philanthropy, and DEI-related initiatives. I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten, how many conversations around, do we change our language? So it's already having an impact, even if you're not an organization that has $500 million in assets. Regulatory uncertainty isn't the only factor, however, that's reshaping or influencing our current environment. There are deeper ongoing trends that are influencing how and where people give charitably, where they give to your organizations and my clients. First, there's public skepticism of institutions is rising. Trust in large philanthropic entities and government funding programs is declining. That didn't just happen because of November. This is pushing donors to demand greater accountability and transparency. Second, giving and volunteering patterns are shifting. Historically, individual charitable giving, which has typically represented the largest pie of all charitable giving in the United States, typically individual charitable giving has remained about 2% of disposable personal income. But recent data shows a troubling trend. Fewer donors are giving, and the sector is becoming increasingly dependent on wealthier contributors. To put this in perspective, the total U.S. charitable giving in 2023 reached more than $557 billion, which sounds good, right? Sounds like great news. However, while this represents a 1.9% increase in current dollars, when adjusted for inflation, it actually reflects a 2.1% decline. This underscores a concern. Philanthropy is becoming more volatile, shaped by economic cycles, tax policy, and donor confidence. Corporate and foundation giving remains strong, but individual giving, the backbone of philanthropy, is shrinking in both participation and dollar amount. We've heard the pattern, dollars up, dollars down. Concentration among the wealthiest. This raises questions about long-term sustainability of grassroots fundraising and broad-based community support. And it raises even greater concern. Who is driving the world order? What world will we live in? Will the mass of people determine the world they want to live in, or will it just be a few individuals? We can't talk about charitable giving without talking or mentioning tax policy. With key provisions of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act set to expire in 2025, nonprofits must prepare for potential shifts in charitable deductions and estate planning strategies. If history is any guide to us, this will bring both challenges and opportunities for fundraising and philanthropic engagement. Among this is what we are seeing as a bright spot, and that is this notion of philanthropic collaboratives, where donors and institutions come together to pool resources for a shared vision. And I think this survey data is important and interesting. Survey data from 2022 identified 270 philanthropic collaboratives, with more than 50% of them established since 2010, and 70 of those formed between 2018 and 2022. These collaboratives, while still relatively new, have become a powerful force, deploying between $4 billion and $7 billion, largely targeted toward equity and diversity grant making, probably a result of the 2020 and George Floyd experience. Now, our recent situation, who knows what the numbers are going to be in 2025 or ongoing. More donors are recognizing the power of working together. And though we may often talk about large philanthropic collaboratives, we also are seeing the pool of smaller dollar individuals bringing together in affinity groups and resource groups. We are certainly at an inflection point. The regulatory environment is shifting, donor behavior is evolving, and trust in institutions is under pressure. Nonprofit leaders cannot afford to take a passive approach. We must stay informed, engaged, and proactive in shaping the policies that defines the sector's future. At the same time, while uncertainty brings challenges, it also brings opportunities to strengthen our strategies, expand our coalitions, and reaffirm our commitment to the communities we serve. I'm so excited about this conversation. I'm glad Mario and his team have brought it together, and Luisa. So I look forward to hearing the discussion from the panel.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And I'm going to save the one question I have for you until we get to the Q&A so we can move on to our two alumni who have joined us to kick off a couple of discussion points related to the topic. Our first alum is Jim Illig. He graduated from the college in 1970, and he has a 45-year career in San Francisco's nonprofit health and social services, from frontline clinician to executive, from advocate to commissioner, and grant seeker to grant maker. Jim's contributions include directing community health strategies and investments for Kaiser Permanente, managing government relations for a pioneer AIDS service provider, and serving as an executive director of two nonprofits providing mental health, substance abuse, and AIDS services. He also has a lot of experience leading coalitions and serving on nonprofit boards. Our second alum who's joining us is Mary Delaney Fox. She recently graduated with a master's in public relations and corporate communications from Georgetown and has a 16-year career in nonprofit management with a background in communications, storytelling, community outreach, special events, and ambassador retention and recognition. Mary specializes in recruiting and building ambassador programs that serve as champions for their nonprofits with a focus on multicultural community outreach and partner engagement. So, Jim and Mary, thanks so much for being our guinea pigs and kicking us off for this discussion. And Jim, I'm going to start with a question for you. What resiliency questions need to be asked of nonprofit board leadership and executive management when core mission and values are challenged by the changes in the political climate?
Well, I want to focus on board members and potential board members in my presentation. And I want to start with the idea that we all know the challenging times require steady stewardship and bold leadership. Effective boards provide that. So I want to frame the discussion with two principles of board governance: trusteeship and reasons for existing. So for the board, the big questions are, who do you work for and what do they want? Spoiler alert, it's not the federal government, and it's not to eliminate your DEI activities. A board of directors governs as trustees on behalf of persons who are not at the table. For example, shareholders own equity corporations, members own trade associations, professional societies, labor unions, and credit unions. Citizens own their city government. For closely held private companies for which all the owners are on the board, it's understandable that the board would make decisions in its own interest. But most organizations are not like that. The board and its members don't own the organization. Most boards accept the fact that they exist to make decisions on behalf of those who do own it. Problems arise when individual members have different and unexamined ideas of trusteeship. So the concept of ownership, whether legal or moral, serves the function of establishing a legitimacy outside the board. It reduces the chance of a board behaving as if the organization actually belongs to the current board or staff or beneficiaries. So if your board of directors governs on behalf of persons who are not seated at the table, who are they? Who owns a community-based nonprofit organization? What about the stakeholders? Many people have a stake in the organization, from the neighbors who hope it doesn't make too much noise, to the staff who depend on it for their livelihood, to the vendors who sell supplies to it. There's no doubt that an ethical obligation is owed to such stakeholders, but this hardly makes them owners. What about the staff? Well, the staff are the owners only in an employee-owned company, but many nonprofit boards act as if the staff are the owners. They get almost all of their information from them and make decisions that the staff place in front of them to approve. Boards have an ethical obligation to ensure fair treatment of staff, but that is very different from allowing the staff to assume ownership prerogative that would make them the superior authority to the board. What about the people we serve? Beneficiaries of our services are owed much, but this doesn't make them owners. On whose behalf was the decision made that they would be beneficiaries? Logically, ownership must pre-exist in order for the customer decision to be made on the owner's behalf. Today's clients may not be the most appropriate ones for the future. So if boards make decisions only based on present clients, it risks preparation for future needs. What about the donors? Even though they are very important, are they individual or corporate donors the owners? If funders are offering money for purposes other than the board intended, the organization has a choice to refrain from accepting the money. The purpose of the organization must be defined by the board first in order to attract donations. What about government funders? The government may act like they own the organization they fund, but they are contracting with a separate entity, a private nonprofit corporation, supposedly because its mission and activities align with the government's priority. The legal relationship is clear, but government funders always want control. Because in nonprofit corporations without legal owners, the organization is still owned by persons outside the board. Because the IRS recognizes the special nature of nonprofit public benefit corporations, allowing them to be both tax exempt and tax deductible for their donors. But in lieu of taxes, these nonprofit corporations must provide a benefit to the public and serve the public's interest. So in the broadest sense, for a nonprofit corporation, the community at large is the owner, and the board governs as trustees for that community. This is especially true when the government grants funds to the organizations to provide a public good. Government support, foundation grants, donations, and volunteers are all signs that the community of owners trusts the organization to serve the public interest. So how do you reach the community of interest whose passion and support have built and sustained your organization? Working with management, the board should first strengthen advocacy and messaging, especially when new federal policies work against the organization's goals. Panelist Mary Fox, who will be talking about demonstrating value of developing ambassadors to carry your message to wider groups. For government-funded organizations, advocacy naturally should include lobbying efforts with elected leaders to educate them about the challenges contractors face. Number two, developing compelling narratives that resonate with supporters, policymakers, and the public. Take proactive steps to demonstrate your values and define the challenge and encourage direct action to counter it. Third, join nonprofit alliances and form collaborations to amplify your voice and impact. I'll have more on that later. Fourth, focus on local and state level advocacy because local and state governments hold the key to sustaining and scaling your work. Build relationships with elected officials through strategic site visits and impact demonstrations. And finally, leverage technology and data to show the effectiveness and human results of your work.
Thanks so much, Jim. Really appreciate it. Mary, I'm going to turn it over to you. And the question I have is, at a time when resources from the government are uncertain, how can nonprofits create opportunities to build and sustain expanded citizen and philanthropic support for their core charitable mission?
Thank you so much for this great and very timely question. So as Valeria and Luisa mentioned earlier, times of change offer a unique opportunity for nonprofits to take a look at their strategic communication plan and examine if there's a need to pivot. Changing economic conditions provide an opportunity to take advantage of innovation and incorporate advancements with technology and being strategic with your nonprofit's mission and goals. Nonprofits can create opportunities to build expanded support for the mission by being flexible and open-minded and quickly adapting to a rapidly changing environment. A powerful communication and engagement resource that every nonprofit should consider maintaining is a database of brand ambassadors that help highlight a nonprofit and increase cause awareness. In my 16 years of nonprofit experience, creating an ambassador program has helped engage our community and leverage support, all while expanding our reach and increasing our nonprofits' visibility, which opened up doors for new opportunities. Ambassadors are volunteers who take on a more public-facing role representing the organization and its mission to the community. They engage with the public, share the organization's message, and encourage support through various activities like attending events, speaking at gatherings, and using social media. If your nonprofit does not have an established ambassador program and all outreach and community engagement is done through full-time staff members, you may want to consider starting an ambassador program, especially if your nonprofit has been impacted by the current times and is experiencing budget cuts and limited staff. If you do have a current ambassador program and it has experienced a decline in active ambassadors, now is also a good time to survey them to obtain information on what may account for low participation rates, inactive ambassadors, or decline in volunteerism. When our nonprofit surveyed our database of ambassadors, we've received great ideas for future programming, offers of introductions with their network, which opened new doors. You can also use platforms like SurveyMonkey or Constant Contact for this. An ambassador program is beneficial for both the nonprofit and the community member. The nonprofit's mission is able to move forward with the help of their biggest supporters, who often have a personal connection to the cause, and the ambassadors, who believe in your mission, find deep significance in serving your nonprofit as a way to give back. Consider also welcoming skills-based volunteers who can help fill in gaps where needed, such as a marketing professional or someone with fundraising experience. Once an ambassador program is established, it's important to concentrate on ambassador recruitment, retention, and recognition. Databases and software management systems like Volunteer Hub and Better Impact are available to help safely and privately store and manage your ambassador and event information. Your ambassador program will grow organically by word of mouth and references from current ambassadors, and also by posting a Volunteer Now link to your nonprofit's Get Involved section of your website. Youth engagement is also an important component to establishing a robust ambassador program. Studies show that younger generations of ambassadors, like Gen Z and millennials, prioritize social impact, which aligns with their values. Students are also looking to find cause-focused organizations to volunteer for school. Here is a tip: when promoting your volunteer program, make sure and share that the students who are volunteers are eligible for volunteer service hours and letters of recommendation for high school, college, or academic clubs. You can also invite families to join ambassadors together. And finally, using all of these elements can help nonprofits thrive by fostering community relationships, building authentic engagement, and counting on long-term commitment from their ambassadors and the community.
Thanks so much, Mary. All right, Chris, you're up first.
All right. So no, thank you all for doing this. Appreciate you all taking the time today to, build a community here. And James Reddick and all you're doing there to build that community. We're in the homeless services sector, and obviously these are people at significant risk. If the funding goes away, these are people who are on the street who will suffer greatly. We have seen partner organizations message from a position of negativity and weakness, and we're actually going in the opposite direction. We're talking very much about what our tools are to solve problems, rather than, I can't tell you the number of times in my personal life I've used the word dumpster fire in the last 2 months, but the reality is I don't think donors or the community want to see us go out with leading with negativity. I think we have to talk about what the tools we have are to help solve societal problems and lead with that degree of positivity, and then even demonstrate it. One thing we did just last week, we had our employment program do a webinar, what to do if you've lost your job. And again, the folks that would be tuning in aren't necessarily the audience that would be part of that program, but the messaging remains the same. And again, just being out there, fostering a degree of, this is what we're doing, this is what we'll continue to do, regardless of the political circumstances. I think that's really the messaging. I think we need to be there, if only for our own mental health. I think continuing to doom scroll probably isn't helpful. If you can identify one thing you can do today to make the world a better place for the people you're serving, I think the happier you'll be and the more successful you'll be. But that's just one person's opinion. So
Yeah, no, Chris, that's really spot on. I've been teaching a session on leading in uncertain times, and one of the most important things leaders can do is to continue to lead with vision. And I think one of the things we've seen Georgetown do is continue to lead with vision. I'm not sure how many people saw the letter that the law school dean sent out, but reminding everyone, this is why we're here. This is why we're legally created as a university, and we're not going to shy away from that. And so I think, being, keeping that positive focus on the longer term, understanding that, yes, we're going to need to be creative and use different tools and strategies for adapting, to what is happening on the, in the immediate future, but really helping people remember, why are we here? What are we trying to achieve for our communities? I think that messaging makes a lot of sense. Mary, did you want to add anything? Because I know that that's also an area that you focus on.
Yes, I had just a thought on that. So in my line of what I do for my nonprofit, and Chris actually alluded to this, leading with the positive for us has been very successful. I think it's very easy to point to the negative, and the community and people see the negative and you don't want to feel like you're just piling on. So for us, leveraging digital storytelling and sharing with permission your ambassadors' connections to nonprofits allows us to broadly share and reach more members of the community and potential partners. It also can have you get more community champions that can help you with your cause. And also teaming up with other nonprofits can help partner with events. Joint initiatives are helpful as well to help amplify your nonprofit. And again, opening new doors, especially in this time where we need to really focus on working together with other nonprofits that align with your values and vision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is by giving people opportunities to get involved, I like to call it activism therapy, right? It's how are we letting people do something positive in the midst of all of this negative media coverage that we're all sort of, getting bombarded with every day. So thinking about this also is just, opportunities for allowing individuals to act on their values too. Rebecca, over to you. What do you want to share with us?
Um, Thank you. And first, Luisa, I think we were in the same graduating class at Georgetown for undergrad, so it's
We
wonderful.
were. And I think there are a couple of others on this call as well. So way to go, 2003.
Absolutely. And the Pittsburgh connection as well.
Exactly.
So I'm Rebecca Cataldi. I'm the Senior Program Director at the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. We're an international nonprofit based in DC that does peace building and conflict transformation work all over the world with a focus on the role that religious actors can play in peace building, although we're not affiliated with any particular religion ourselves. And I guess I had 2 points. One is that even before the current political shift, we'd been working on sort of diversifying our funding sources so as not to be dependent on any one sector, whether it's government or private foundations or so forth. And in particular, we've been looking at connecting more with sort of philanthropists, high wealth individuals that have an interest in peace building, that have an interest in the role that faith can play in peace building and in transforming the role of faith when it's being misused to promote conflict. And so, we have some of our own strategies for connecting with such people, but I'm just curious if others have strategies that they've found helpful for connecting with high wealth individuals, given that a lot of us don't travel in those circles, normally. But we also ideally, we're not asking someone to just write a check, but be an active partner with us and, work together with us on implementing something that aligns with both of our values and really has the maximum good for the people we're trying to serve. So I was curious about that. And secondly, I think what's also really important for nonprofits right now is to build coalitions where we can, so that rather than competing for even more limited resources, we're kind of leveraging our strengths and pooling our resources where we can. So again, throwing that out there, if anyone here is working on peace building, I'll put my email in the chat. I'd love to connect about building on each other's strengths.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. And that was a perfect segue. I want to turn over to Valerie first to just give some thoughts. She does a lot of work with high net worth individuals, but also just in general, Valerie, about diversifying funding in these times.
Well, big picture, because Rebecca, I can't diagnose your organization because, I don't have that information. So I don't want to be prescriptive, but I'll just try to put a big rock in the jar. And it comes back to, I think, what Jim was talking about, this notion of values, right? And what is the purpose of a nonprofit? And we often think that the purpose of the nonprofit is just to deliver programs and services to the beneficiaries. But we, as Jim so eloquently shared, we also have a responsibility to donors and people who may not be beneficiaries of the services. And so the best way to access donors is to be very clear about your values. And because the work of development, of fund development, is the process of uncovering shared values between prospective donors and your organization's mission, right? Creating that linkage. The other piece, I think, is mindset shift that has to happen to attract folks who are maybe what you call high net worth. I would encourage you to remember that a high net worth individual for your organization looks very different than a high net worth individual for Georgetown University. So for my organization, well, I have a nonprofit, but someone else's organization, that it might be high net worth might for them might mean $10,000. I'm saying major gift, right? So I think you all strategically, the big rock in the jar has to be really looking first internally at your current donor base, right? And how your board is constituted. And I think also with high net worth individuals, it, as I said, with values alignment, it also looks at where are you strategically positioned in the marketplace? Where do you show up? This is a time to show up in places where we don't normally show up. And if we just focus on being with people who are like-minded, which is very different in my mind from values aligned, right? If we only want to talk to each other, we're not going to win. And the other piece, Rebecca, so I would modify your last statement a bit by saying, you know, when you open up the floor around peace, joining with organizations who are doing peace work, yes, you want to join with those who are doing peace work, but you also want to join with those who want to do peace work, but may not be doing peace work. Because that's really where the opportunity is, where you can add value to their organization.
Thanks so much, Valerie. And then Jim, I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about the other part of Rebecca's comment on coalition building. And could you just share a little bit about your experience there?
Now, the many difficulties of contracting with the government should bring nonprofit contractors together as trade associations to advocate for fair and transparent contracting. Collective lobbying of elected officials can influence government contracting policies and procedures. That's been my experience from founding and leading a number of contractor associations in which organizations that would normally compete for government funding come together to speak with one voice for a level playing field. Now more than ever, collaborations are necessary to face these challenges from the federal budget cuts and policy changes. And our best bet right now is the courts. In California, many contractor associations and individual nonprofits joined together to file amicus briefs in court cases challenging the first Trump administration's orders, and are doing the same thing now to contest Trump 2.0 budget cuts and policy directives. We found in the first Trump administration, our amicus briefs were recognized by the judges as very helpful in deciding their cases. So there's a lot of reasons to come together, especially when we're challenged from the outside. And I encourage every nonprofit to look outside and find those collaborations to join.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jim. And thanks for the reminder about the important advocacy piece around the collaborations too. One of the things I found in my research on nonprofit coalitions was that a lot of organizations start their advocacy experiences through coalitions because it allows them a bit of coverage, right? But also an opportunity to learn from others who've been doing the work and access to experts. A lot of coalitions do, employ either lawyers or lobbyists, and they're ones who really understand what the policy landscape looks like and what it would take and what are the opportunities that exist for either pushing for or pushing against existing legislation. So fantastic. Mario, over to you.
I was struck by Chris's remarks and what he's doing to diversify funding. But my main question is there any value in nonprofits taking on the issue of transparency, efficiency, and accountability, and showing that, and this related to this whole issue of building trust, showing that they really are getting a great return on investment. They get and it's also a message that they're sending out that, we get where the current climate is, and we really want to show you how truly productive and accountable and transparent we are. Basically embrace the argument, but then reverse it and show how you really do show outcomes for what's being invested in you. So is that a valuable strategy or not?
So, Luisa, may I lean in on that? So,
You
thanks,
may.
Mario. Thanks for that. So, one of the things I think that as a consultant advisor, both to nonprofits, but also working with high net worth individuals and all types of donors, is there is an assumption in the climate that we all agree on what is the return on investment that we value. And so, what I would encourage you all to do in this climate and ongoing is your current donors, make sure you understand what they value most, what they see as a return on an investment. If you are defining the return on investment for another individual or group, you've missed the mark. As an investor, only I can tell you what I value. The only way you're going to know that is to be in conversation and to ask the question. But what I have seen over the past 20 years is that in the nonprofit sector, we name what the return on investment for the investor. And I think that's a misalignment. And the goal of effective development and leadership is to bridge the two. But in order to bridge, we've got to understand what is it that my stakeholders, in my case, I'm talking about donors, actually see as a return on an investment.
Thanks so much, Valerie. And I think that also speaks to some of the broader, trends that we saw in the nonprofit sector for a while, where they said, well, can't we just, make sure use overhead as a way to understand the impact that all nonprofits are having? And we all pushed back and we said, of course we can't do that. And so I think that there is this really important nuance to what does value mean and to whom, and how are we using multiple messages for different audiences rather than just using one message and hoping that it hits everyone in the same way. James, over to you.
Thanks, Luisa. Hey, everybody. I'm James Radek. I'm undergrad class of '89, like Chris. And as I've mentioned in the chat, I'm one of the founders of the new Hoya Social Impact Alliance. And so we really want to create this big community of the innumerable Hoyas like yourselves that are out there doing this amazing work in their communities, especially at this challenging time. And so again, encourage you to join us through the website, through LinkedIn. I do want to mention, per some of the comments I think that Rebecca made earlier, is that we're looking to create networks within the Social Impact Alliance. And we're getting started with a couple networks that focus on education. So folks that work in some aspect of the education sector and then the philanthropy sector. But we're going to be building on these alliances, including peace building, Rebecca, so we can connect with one another, not just broadly within the social impact field, but within very specific sectors over time. So I'm going to encourage you to get signed up, and then you will see more information about that, because we absolutely need, as I mentioned, more connection, more collaboration in these times ahead to, again, deal with the challenges and also create some new opportunities for ourselves. So thank you all so much for being here, and I'll turn it back over to Luisa.
Thanks, James. All right, we're going to keep going with our raised hands. So I don't have your first name, but Lipsky is the last name. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Lisa Lipsky. I'm an audit partner for serving not-for-profits. I guess my question, and listen, great content thus far. I guess it would be two-part. One, what would the panelists suggest would be the top 3 levers not-for-profits could pull given potential storm clouds in scenario planning, et cetera? And second, how is the board changing? How can they be more agile to assist the not-for-profit in this time of uncertainty?
Thanks, Lisa. That was not a tough question. No, really easy questions you gave them. So let's see. In terms of levers, Valerie, do you want to try that one?
Oh my God, there's so much I could say, you all. There's so much. And because I'm, Lisa, is that correct? Okay. I'm thinking about this stuff all the time for 20 plus years on this. And a Georgetown scholar may say something totally different, but I'm just going to give you what my experience has been and what I'm seeing is a couple of things. One, nonprofit organizations, let me correct that. Nonprofit businesses have to always play defense and offense at the same time. Okay? It may feel like we currently now are in a defensive position, right? Because we're responding to things coming at us. If in that defensive position, there are some core business areas that we have to pay attention to. One is the people, our talent development, our talent retention, and our talent acquisition. The other is program and services. Are our programs really what we should be doing? Are the areas where we have to enhance? Revenue. What is our revenue strategy and plan? What is our financial strategy? What is our financial management strategy? What are our organizational operations that we have to defend and protect in the defensive mode? So playing defensively means that our leadership, our board, and our management and staff, we're looking at responding to risk and managing risk that we're not initiating. Okay, things that are coming at us. On the offensive side, so we got to do both at the same time. And I could go in a whole Super Bowl analogy between Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs, but I won't do that, right? But playing offensively means proactively pursuing growth and innovation and new opportunities in the midst of playing defensively. What does that look like? Forward thinking. Somebody in the organization, a group of people have to be looking at how do we play offensively while we're in this defense mode, looking for opportunity and innovation. What does that look like? It looks like taking time, strategic time, to look at your donor landscape, what you have, understanding who they are, what are their patterns of giving, how do they allocate their giving, and what are new markets that we might be able to attract? And then my final point. So the first point is the ability to play defensively and offensively at the same time. And Lisa, know when I'm doing one of them, okay? The last point I want to make is around business model. Because we've got our heads down a bit playing defensively, we may not feel like we can do that because we feel like we don't have the time. You've always got to have the time to run your business. And that is this a time to look at our business model? Do we have the right business model for Wednesday? Do we have the right business model for a year from now? What is our business model for the organization? How should our infrastructure, operations, and revenue models be interlocking? The business model, I suspect, of many organizations that they had 5 or 10 years ago is not the business model that they need going forward. Are you willing to do the hard work to have that conversation? I know that's a lot, and it's heavy, but that's my truth.
Yeah. Thank you so much,
Thank
Valerie.
you.
And then Jim, do you want to speak quickly to flexibility on the board, and especially like how do we get our boards to be able to adapt to these changing times?
So Valerie talked about you got to keep your heads down. I believe the board has to keep its head up and has to have the big picture perspective as trustees for the owners. It's really about not what an organization does, but what an organization is for. It's looking at the effect on human beings that these organizations have. The trustees as communities, the trustees for the community of owners needs the board to clarify the who, what result, what part of the person's life experience will be different than it otherwise would have been, a matter of effectiveness, and what value. Since resources are always limited, the board expects the operating organization to yield enough of that result to be worth what the effort costs, a matter of efficiency or priority. And I believe boards should just laser focus on what good are we doing, for whom, at what cost, and keep emphasizing the effect that we have on human beings. rather than what activities we do.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jane. What would you like to share with us, Mary Jane?
Well, first, class of 77, working with nonprofits for 30 years in philanthropy, planning, and governance. And I want to say how encouraging it is to see almost 90 people on this call. And I want to ask those of us who are over, let's just say 40, to make sure that we're doing wellness checks with the people in our communities who are working in this sector. Because I think it's a time where people just appreciate a call, how are you doing in these last 2 months? So I think we all have a responsibility to do that. The presenters have said a lot today, all of which is incredibly valuable. I think some of it is very tactical. It's really responding in the moment and dealing with that day-to-day resiliency. And then I think some of it is more strategic. I think where what I am taking away from this is an affirmation that all of our conversations, whether they be with those who join in us with us in supporting our work. I don't like high net worth individual term at all. I find it mildly offensive. And I spent much of the last 30 years working with people who are incredibly generous. They don't like being referred to that way. I think they are partners and people who walk with us to live the values through the work of the organizations with whom we work and we support. So I think number one, I'd ask to reframe that. I think the comments about finding the intersection of values and beliefs and then finding the choices that manifest those, the strategy. I think one thing we haven't talked about today is the humility to also share with partners, those who support us, the things that have not worked well, where we are challenged, where the failures have been, and to be honest and transparent about that. That's where trust is built, right? And I think the sector, the philanthropic sector, has an opportunity to be the only trusted sector at the moment. It will only achieve that by transparency and vulnerability. So 2 cents from an old lady, but thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Mary Jane. And trust is really, what is going to trust and relationship building, right, is what's going to carry us through these times, but also make us more stronger and more resilient going forward. So really appreciate that. We wanted to end with just a couple of opportunities for staying in touch. I know we're going to be putting a very short evaluation form in the chat just to get some feedback, but also to think through what other topics you might want to discuss in webinars like this going forward. So we've got some upcoming events that we are hosting here at the center, as well as some of our partners who are on the call as well. So on March 20th, we have an information session on our Nonprofit Management Executive Certificate Program. If it's something people have considered in the past, you can learn more there. On April 11th, we're doing a virtual funder briefing on state and local advocacy strategies in the new political landscape. That should be really, hopefully tactical and giving some ideas of other ways that funders, but also I think nonprofits in general, can get more involved in advocacy at the state and local levels. April 22nd, we have an information session on our executive certificate in philanthropic leadership. If you are on the philanthropy side, please check that out. And on April 23rd, we are having an in-person, so if you are DC-based, workshop on AI readiness. We're launching a new toolkit for nonprofits, and so it'll be a workshop related to that. And then I know James is going to be hosting a board service panel on May 1st. Save the date on that one. We don't have the link yet for RSVPs, but it's coming soon, and I will be participating in that as well. And then we've put together just a sample of nonprofit resiliency resources for you, including the National Council of Nonprofits tracker on executive orders affecting charitable nonprofits. They also came out with a new resource a couple of days ago for those nonprofits that are receiving government grants and contracts, and if those are canceled, how to respond. There are also links to additional policy organizations like the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. If you're in DC and you're worried about home rule, we've got links to 2 resources on that topic. DC Action, the Massachusetts Nonprofit Network to cover those guys, those of you up in Boston, and then some additional resources, a TED Talk on nonprofit board governance, and also the Nonprofit Quarterly is also covering a number of related topics, including resiliency strategies. So I am going to turn it over to Mario to take us home here.
Well, first I want to thank you, Luisa, for a great job facilitating this. I want to thank our speakers. I especially want to thank Valerie for her really informative contributions. And I just want to thank the audience for coming and actively participating in this event. And I think, as Luisa mentioned, down the road, there's certainly going to be other opportunities for us to connect on nonprofit issues. And we really very much want to hear back from you on what specific topics you would like to engage in and have more conversation around. And treat this forum as a collective opportunity to really share ideas, recommendations, and resources about how to succeed going forward. For me, the great takeaways today were playing offense and defense at the same time. I love it. Looking at your business model to make it more timely and relevant. And I think Mary, loved Mary's final takeaway with regard to looking at your failures, building trust, building transparency around what has worked and what has not worked, and being a little bit humble, and perhaps that can certainly maintain and sustain the trust quotient for your organization. So a lot said here, a lot to capture. We are going to record, we have recorded this video. We are going to publish it on the Georgetown YouTube platform. Hopefully it attracts a lot of likes, and we hope that people will continue to keep this dialogue on this very important sector of our society going. There's too much going on here to ignore it. And I just want to thank everybody again for making this such a great webinar. Thanks.